Hey there, welcome to today's episode. I'm going to be doing a part 2 about this £14 MIDI controller that I bought from Temu. Now, I'm not going to be discussing Temu again. I've already given my thoughts in the first video, and it was really interesting to read the feedback from you guys about what you think about companies like that. I said it in the first episode that if you take Temu out of the equation, I actually think this is a really good little product, and I'd prefer to buy it directly from the manufacturer if I could, or at least a more reputable source. Now, this isn't going to be a long video, but I just want to talk about a couple of things I've discovered since owning this. I want to start off by mentioning that this has a 3.5mm MIDI jack on the back. I forgot to mention that in the first episode. So if you want to connect this up via a cable rather than the Bluetooth, you can. And in terms of the Bluetooth connection, I find that once you've paired your device once, every time you turn this device on, it connects flawlessly. We can turn it on now, and it should be good to go. Now, one of the first things I want to address is for Koala sampler users. It probably help you out as well on other devices, but in the YouTube comments, there was a question about the play and record buttons once you've MIDI mapped those. So let's take a look. We'll go into our settings and then to map MIDI. I'll move over to sequence, and in the first episode, I mapped my play button and my record button to the device. I didn't bother with the pause button because Koala uses just a play button to play and stop, so you don't really need to map the pause button. And I'll talk about that again in a second. But if you've just bought one of these things and you take it straight out of the box, when you try to press play or record, what you'll notice is that you have to hold down play or hold down record in order for it to function. Now, obviously, that's not what you want. That's not going to be very good. But the solution for that is that you need to download the application. There is a QR code on the back of the device, and they have given you a specific application for editing the parameters on this controller. Now, unfortunately, my OBS is playing up at the moment, so I'm just going to use a screenshot and show you the functions. You will notice there are some modes for each of the buttons, and if you switch out your play and record button to toggle mode, it will then stay on when you press it. So it can be fixed. It's not a problem with the controller. It's just something you need to change inside of the application. And while we're speaking about the application, I will say it's pretty comprehensive. There are a lot of parameters and things that you can change on this device if you want to set it up and make it more custom for your needs. And with that said, I'm going to stop MIDI mapping here, but I just wanted to show you that. Now, if I press play, you'll see it playing as it should, and it stops when I press play again. And record is the same deal. I can record or I can stop recording. Now, the same person who was having problems with their controller also mentioned that when they hooked this thing up and they were playing the samples, it would only play the selected pad in chromatic mode. Now, I do believe that is actually a function inside of Koala that's not set correctly. Let's just quickly load up a sample of some kind. I'm just going to switch to my first pad bank, and if I press the pad up here, you're going to hear this sample play. If for some reason you have this piano roll icon selected, it's going to play chromatically. So just make sure that is turned off. It's not the first time I've seen people have problems with Koala, wondering why the samples are all triggering chromatically, but it's usually because that has been selected. It's easy to do, sometimes you press it by accident. Now, another really cool thing is that when we are triggering our pad on our MIDI controller, it's triggering Koala sampler, but it is also triggering the pad on the SP when you have these two connected because of the really nice integration we got from Roland that now allows the SP and Koala sampler to connect. You can see that triggering across all of the devices. Really good fun. Now, a couple of other things about the way I've got mine set up. I don't use the pause button on the device, so I had a free button. I set mine up to trigger edit because I like to go in and edit the samples a lot, so when I press edit, you will notice it opens up the editing screen. In the first episode as well, I mapped my start and end points inside of Koala to the top two rotaries here, so I can move my start and end points. You notice those shifting along. Can move the end point, can move the start point, can move the loop around. Now, one thing that I did notice is that there's a little delay sometimes just for the first time you move the rotaries and trigger some of these parameters. So if we take a look at volume for a second, as I move this rotary, you'll notice it takes a second to recognize it and then it kicks in. Once it's kicked in, it's fine. You'll come back to that because I've already triggered the pitch. You can see the pitch is moving, and I also triggered the pan as well, which is now working perfectly. But the first time you use them, it seems like there's a little moment where it needs to recognize that you've moved the rotary in order to get that working. Now, another comment was that I didn't spend long enough showing you the pads in action. I'm not the world's greatest finger drummer or anything, and I'm going to be just using my right hand because of the way this is set up, but I will play these a little bit more just on the pads so that you can see the connection between the pads and the device. I think it's excellent. It's also going to be triggering over here on the SP as well. You get the idea. I spoke about the sensitivity settings that you can change in the first episode. Now, the final thing I want to mention is note repeat. A couple of people had asked me about that. It's not something I use very often, but let me show you it in action. Now, if you hold down your shift button and press your pad, you get note repeat triggering to whatever division you've set that up to. In this case, it's triggering at 1/16 notes, but in the first episode, again, I showed you can change those divisions. Now, what I'm going to do here, I've set the tempo to 80 BPM. We'll create a sequence, and I just want to trigger that and show you it recording inside of Koala because I think there was some concerns or some questions about that. Now, keep in mind, I don't use note repeat a lot. When I put notes in, I prefer doing it manually. Now, let's quickly just make sure that quantize is set. So it's quantizing to 1/16 notes. And that's what we're triggering on the pad. You can see it firing off, and of course, it is snapping those to 1/16 notes on the grid. I was a little slow in my timing at the beginning, that was more human error. Now, you would have to play around with the settings for yourself, because of course, if you switch your quantization for the device to say something like 1/4 notes, and you're triggering at 1/16 notes, it's still going to do its best to try and snap the other way. So what we'll do is we'll turn quantization off so that we can just see how that reacts. And if we open up another sequence, we can just do the same thing again, but this time without any quantization. And you can see it's reacting as I would expect because we're not trying to quantize it to the grid inside of the device. So we're getting perfect 16th notes. However, they're not all snapped to the grid. Because it's a function I don't use a lot, I'm not exactly sure what people are expecting from the note repeat, but as far as I can tell, it seems to work as I would expect it to. If we come out and just change the division, if you do shift and note repeat, you can change the division. So let's change it to 132. And on another sequence, let's just record that in as well. You can see it's putting those notes in as it should. Again, we're not using quantization, but it looks pretty good to me. You could apply quantization at 132, and obviously it's going to snap it rigid to the grid. But for those that were interested in note repeat, I just wanted to show you that in real time so you can see how it reacts. Anyway, that's going to be it for this particular episode. Just some final thoughts. I think it's a really nice little MIDI controller. The Bluetooth connection works perfectly well. It connects perfectly every time I turn the device on. I'm not having to repair it. The rotary encoders feel solid and they react as I expect them to when the device is connected. The pads are surprisingly sensitive considering the price point. Even if you apply one of the velocity curves so that you got some velocity variation, it reacts really well. I've charged this thing up once since I bought it, and it's been running off that same charge for quite a few sessions, good few long hours. So again, I can't really fault it there. The build quality feels pretty good. It's relatively solid. It doesn't feel flimsy. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with it overall, particularly since I paid only £14 for this thing. Anyway, I'm going to sign off there. I hope that answers some of the questions that you had in the comments from the first video. I genuinely think this is a great little device for the money. It would just be nice if I felt like I could buy one from a reputable source. Anyway, take care. I'll see you guys in the next one.